Do you know what this tiny American island, this Chinese province and all these areas have in common? None of them wants to be their own country, but at one point in time they did. So what really happened that they lost their drive to be an independent country? The reasons are very different from what you might think. So let's zoom into the Middle East, where the Kurds, specifically the ones in Iraq, have long fought for independence, but recently they'll start giving up on the idea. You see, the Kurds are a group of people who were left divided after the British split up the Middle East, but at the last moment didn't really fulfill the earlier plans of creating a Kurdistan. Across 4 countries, Iraq, Turkey, Syria and Iran, Kurdish groups have fought for independence, and especially when America invaded parts of the Middle East, the Kurds were often asked for help, but most of the time they were betrayed. However, after the fall of Saddam Hussein, the 2005 Iraqi constitution finally recognized Kurdistan region as a federal entity. The Kurdish region government has its own president, parliament and armed forces. They even control most of their natural resources like oil. This is where things get complicated. In 2017, they held a referendum where most people voted for independence, but still no action has been taken. The reason is, if it decides to become a country, the first problem Iraqi Kurdistan would face is that it would be landlocked. Now that's not as big of a deal, as other landlocked countries just use their neighboring country's port. But in this case, the neighboring countries are not really fond of the idea of an independent Kurdish state. This would also mean it would have North Sea access to sell its biggest export, oil. The current oil pipeline goes to Turkey, which can just literally cut it off anytime it wants. This is the perfect recipe for economic collapse, and even the United States, which support the Kurds in fighting ISIS, doesn't really support a Kurdish independence because it would destabilize Iraq and alienate key allies like Turkey. So for now, the Kurds have decided to stay within Iraq. Alright, let's move to Southeast Asia, where a literal tsunami once washed away an entire country's independence plans. Aceh is a province on the island of Sumatra in Indonesia. Historically, it was part of the Aceh Sultanate. In modern times, for decades, it was a base of a strong rebel group that wanted independence because of the local anger over money from natural resources and a heavy-handed rule by Jakarta. But Mother Nature had different plans. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami killed hundreds and thousands of people and devastated the region. The disaster weakened the rebel groups and completely changed the political mood. Indonesia provided aid and rescue effort, and people in general just became tired of war. In 2005, they struck a peace deal. Aceh was given local political parties, local police, and rights to manage some of its own money. In return, the rebels had to destroy their weapons, disband their military wing, adopt democratic elections, and rebrand as a political entity, transforming the Free Aceh movement into Partai Aceh. Today, Aceh is the only province in Indonesia that implements strict Sharia laws, meaning the punishment for the same crime can be different depending on where you are in the country. Many Aceh leaders also realized that being part of Indonesia but with special rights was safer than risking a new war to try the full independence. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, please leave a like. It really helps sending a positive signal to the algorithm. Alright, let's move to the United Kingdom, where Scotland is stuck in a limbo for a while. Now, it's pretty well known that Scots have been fighting for their independence from England for centuries. But things have changed, where people's vote in recent referendum tells a completely different story. You see, for hundreds of years, Scotland was its own kingdom. In 1707, Scotland joined with England to form the United Kingdom. In the late 1900s and 2000, Scotland got its own parliament and many of its powers back. They now control education, health, justice, and even some taxes. But the UK Parliament still has the final authority, and this doesn't sit well with many Scots. Many want to become an independent country, or at least that's what people thought. In 2014, Scotland held a big referendum, and surprisingly 58% of people actually voted to stay in the UK. The reason is people worried about the money, economy, and future. Businesses and pension funds said leaving could cost jobs and savings. Also, many Scots like being part of a bigger, powerful country that helps with defense, trade, and international deals. But there are plans of another referendum in 2026 to really find out if Scotland wants to leave or not. Now let's move towards the United States, where Puerto Rico voted for the 7th time on whether it wants to become a country or become the 51st state of the United States. And the result was unexpected. You see, Puerto Rico has been stuck in this political situation for a long time. It was a Spanish colony until 1898, when the United States took control. Today, Puerto Rico is a US territory. They have their own constitution, governor, but the people are US citizens, subject to US federal law and taxes. However, Puerto Rico is still not a US state and cannot vote in the presidential elections. So why don't Puerto Ricans leave? Well, in the most recent 2024 vote, only about 12% of Puerto Ricans supported full independence. Meanwhile, around 58% voted to become a US state. Many islanders enjoy the benefit it gets being with the US social programs, federal disaster aid, access to a huge job market, travel freedom, and the safety net that comes with belonging to the most richest and powerful country on earth. Independence would mean building an entirely new economy, new international relationships, something many people see as risky. So today the debate is mostly about whether Puerto Rico should remain a territory or become a state. However, Hong Kong is in an even more complex situation. Hong Kong was a British colony for about 150 years. In 1997, it was handed back to China under an agreement called One Country, Two Systems. The deal promised Hong Kong a high degree of freedom, separate laws, codes, and rights for 50 years. But why didn't Hong Kong try to become its own country? First, Beijing made it very clear that independence is completely off the table. China is a huge, powerful country that takes its borders a little too seriously, and it will not allow a former colony to break away. Also, one China policy that says that there's only one China would mean you're not getting recognized by any other country in the world, just like Taiwan, even if you manage to get independence. Second, Hong Kong's economy is deeply tied to mainland China. Independence would risk losing major trading relationships, access to markets, and investment. While many people in Hong Kong want greater freedoms, not everyone supports full independence. And any serious attempts at independence would face enormous pressure from Beijing and from other countries that don't want to risk a massive geopolitical conflict. After the major protests in recent years, Beijing tightened control through national security laws, which dramatically changed the political landscape and made independence even less realistic. And what's even more interesting is that in 2047, Hong Kong's special autonomous status is expiring, and there's no telling what's going to happen to it after. Zanzibar is another one of those places. It used to be its own sultanate, later a short-lived republic. Historically, it was a major trade hub for spices and goods moving between Asia and Africa. In 1964, it joined with Tanganyika, the mainland, to create Tanzania. Since then, Zanzibar has kept some local powers, including its own president, along with a distinct culture and history. There has always been political movements pushing for a full independence, but the idea never really caught on. You see, when Zanzibar joined the Union, leaders were worried about the stability and money. Being part of a bigger country helped with defense and trade, and over time the cost and risk of leaving, like losing mainland services, trade links, and political influence, made independence even less attractive. Zanzibar already gets special local control, which many locals see as good enough. While some regions stopped chasing away independence, others are actually becoming new countries very soon. These are 6 new countries that will be forming soon, including one that would be smaller than Vatican City. If you want to know which ones they are, check out this video, and don't forget to hit and subscribe.